So for those of you watching us live, there you go. All right.
Okay, there we go.
Welcome.
It happens to the best of us. It's okay.
Woo. We're nervous. These two beings that we have. Hello. Welcome to this 1111 podcast. We're laughing because just before this moment, this wasn't recorded and we were talking. And so just to give a little preface, but thank you for taking a moment to be with us here. I'm Jason Michael.
I'm Heather Grace.
We're lovingly known as the Powers of Love. And we have two dear friends of ours, Laura Matsue and Bernhard Gunther. And we'll give a little bio of these two, but today, this 11/11 day, for those, I've said it all the time, you know, it's a very holy WHO, of really what the 11/11 truly means. We'll get more into that a little bit, but we want to thank these two for being with us. And what would you like to say, love?
I just want to say, you know, you guys for us have been such a balm to our heart sometimes, because as you guys know, people that are doing this kind of work together as couples, sometimes we call our second address the cauldron. It feels like, you know, the intensity, the waves of intensity and then transcendence are equally high and low. And to witness two people doing this, you guys are a continual inspiration to our heart. And it's just to know that other people are braving this path always gives us just a lot of encouragement on the path. So I want to just bring in who you guys are so people understand your work in the world. First, we're going to just talk about Laura. Laura is a somatic counselor and a practitioner of compassionate inquiry, which is Gabor Mate's work. IFS, if you know, internal family systems therapy, and other practices, somatic and psychospiritual therapies, in an embodied and trauma-informed approach. She's also a teacher of yoga and meditation and an evolutionary astrologer, an incredible one, I might add. And she calls all of this psychospiritual coaching. I think it's so appropriate as she works with the whole body, mind, soul, and spirit.
And Bernhard Gunther's articles, webinars, films, and interviews, talks ranging from spirituality, shamanism, psychology, self-work, esotericism, history, politics, to the occult, and to the hyperdimensional realities. His work has been featured on various websites, radio stations, podcasts across the interwebs. Bernhard's also giving talks and lectures at conference events and festivals that he's being invited to speak at. And I'll say, you know, we want to give credit to Anaya Sophia, who's the one that introduced Bernhard to me personally many years ago. And I can say that, you know, I've been following Bernhard's work for a long time and just really resonated, and also was rightly challenged in my own personal journey of understanding, you know, there are spiritual realities on the light and the dark side, and to understand how we are programmed by, you know, these forces. And that's been, but watching the evolution of you, brother, of watching your heart open up to relationship, and watching Laura come into your life, and we've witnessed from a distance for a while, watching this relationship continue to blossom and then show up as what we know as sacred activists, you know, not just social activists, but sacred activism and what that truly means, and showing up as evolutionary lovers, relationship and divine union that's in service to the planet, to, as you lovingly talk about, this time of transition that we are in on this planet. And you too, as Heather says, I just echo, these last 3 years have been beacons for our life, for the love. They're really resonant, the mirrors of our hearts, and, you know, mentors of ours. You know, we look at you as not just, you know, friends and so, but mentors. And we took 3 months with these two at the end of 21. And I truly believe that process put me in the hospital.
Oh yeah, you got really sick after, right? And then Heather had something happen too, right? Short, like
and
months
it's an
after.
interesting, like, you know, at the time of, you know, I tested positive for this thing, and it was told to me that I contacted on 11/11, and I knew that something beyond catching something was happening. And it was a lot of the process, I can be honest here and transparent, that going through the traumas of what Embodied Soul Awakening has you go into, as Almas talks about, your holes, you know, these places where,
Leaks.
you know, where the leaks are in your etheric body, where the anti-forces can come in, and if you're not dealing with these traumas. And so that's kind of our conversation, and right, from trauma to transcendence.
Yeah, totally. So I would love to ask a first question of you guys. And it's always curious for us to hear how a couple came together and how you both knew, respective of each other, that that was the one.
All right.
You want to go first? Or
Yes, I
you
can.
go first? Okay.
I think when did we first connected? That was 2018, early 2018. Yeah.
Yeah, although I just found me posting a quote of yours back in 2017. So I
Really?
think I found your work in
Okay.
like late 2017.
Yeah, I remember you added me on Facebook around 2017. Got a friend request from this lovely lady. And Facebook back then was very different than it's now. You know, I mean, we know things have changed. Like it's kind of going downhill. But anyway, and back then I've been single for a long time. I have had my share of lessons of intense kind of relationships. You know, when stuff comes up and breakups and feeling even like I don't want to be ever in a relationship again. This sucks, especially for my work and the material I get into. I had to be very careful who I get involved with. So I was really up at this point before I met her, I was single for 5 years, 5 or 6 years. And I had to do a lot of healing. I doubled up on my self-work because a lot of stuff in my previous relationship came up, the childhood wounding. You know, when you're really sincere in your self-work, you cannot just blame your partner, right? You know that, because your own stuff gets triggered. So I had a lot of stuff confront. I noticed that I was also, because I love getting deeper into spiritual esoteric work, I was spiritual bypassing. So I had to go back, quote unquote, and really work on my childhood trauma, narcissistic wounding, childhood stuff, reparenting myself, shadow work, and all of that. And then I felt more naturally like, I felt in a sense, I remember that I'm like, okay, I've done this work so much on my own, but I've hit a wall. So I knew I couldn't progress. I know I could use a relationship will dive me deeper into it. Not to use a relationship as an escape of like I used to in the past, you know, like, oh, she's the one, we're going to be happy and she's going to fulfill me and all of this. Like, no, there was more sober calling of like, hey, I could be ready, but I'm not, no desperation anymore. I think I got myself into bad relationships out of desperation, right? When we like the need, you know? And then I remember like she added me, and then I really loved her posts. They were very intelligent, but also her humor. Like she made me laugh. She had this very original humor, but there was wisdom behind it, right? And then the first couple of months, I pressed like in a post and all of that. But I got triggered because she added me as a friend, but she never liked my stuff.
I have lots of Scorpio planets, so I
got triggered by that. And like, God damn, why she added me? Like, you know, I wanted her attention, you know. And then out of, you know, what I usually learn not to do on Facebook, especially with females, I actually messaged her. And that was early 2018, or something like that. Yeah. And I just sent her, hey, Laura, you know, really enjoy your posts. You know, they are really they're full of wisdom and enjoy humor, lighten up my day. Thank you so much. And that was it. Even now, without kind of trying to get any hints, but you know, and that kind of started off. I got a reply back, thankfully. Yeah. And we started off a conversation, just chatting, just talking normally, and then it morphed into like Skype calls, and we just talked and, you know, got to know each other. And then Laura went to India for a few months.
Yeah, right? At least 3 months.
3 months. And then I'm also like, yeah, okay, she's just doing her thing. And like, you know, just, and then on her way back from India, she you know, stopped by at my place in Los Angeles back then, Topanga. And that's when I first met in person. And I would say when we first hugged on the airport, it was pretty clear. That's kind of, you can't really know
for sure until you meet someone in person, right? Like,
totally, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, the great thing was actually the long distance of really talking to each other for months, you know,
like getting to know each other
rather than getting physical right away.
Yes.
Yeah, that can confuse things for sure. Yeah, and I mean, people do it, but it can just confuse things. Yeah. Yeah, and I guess on my side, I remember when it's so weird. I have this like visceral memory of when I first went to his website and I saw his name, and his name looked like it was glowing and it was very familiar to me. And so that's what made me add him, actually, because I read a lot of different stuff online. I don't add everyone. And so I was like, okay, there's something about this person. And then I remember even when he was liking my post, I knew he was going to message me one day. I was really busy, actually, like trying to get enlightened, basically. But I was really focused on my spiritual path. And in similar ways to him, I had kind of like just put relationships to the side for now. I was like, okay, this is what I want to focus on. I was meditating like hours a day. That's why I went to India as well, to kind of like, improve my practice, basically. So I was not entirely focused on relationships when we met, although I'm a Libra sun, so I like relationships, generally speaking. But I think there was this deeper knowing when we first started talking, actually. Like, if I really honest with my own soul, even in the beginning when we were talking, I knew that something deep was there that I hadn't experienced before. Like, you just have that connection, right? And I think just because of, similar to him, my own bad experiences in relationships, I was a bit more, I guess, practical and rational, rather than just like, oh, I feel like we know each other from other lifetimes, and just, going to run off to LA. I was like, no, let's hold off, and I really, I knew that if it were something that we're going to last, it would last when I went away there as well. So that was good in the beginning to kind of have that space, because I think also my pattern is to kind of go really deep and hard, and that hasn't worked out for me before. So yeah, and then now almost 5 years later, or 6 years.
Then we had a long trip because she was living on Vancouver Island. Beautiful
I was
place.
living in an eco village when we met, in an intentional community. So it's also been a very big lifestyle change, moving down to the US and everything.
Yeah, because we've been long distance for a while. She visited me, I visited her a few times, back and forth.
Yeah, we were long distance, actually. Well, I was spending like months in the US, but we were long distance for like most of over half the relationship. Which is also another challenge in itself, because like you really have to, since you don't have that like physical connection, you really have to get to know each other in deeper ways beyond just that when you're long distance as well. And so I think that when you're physically together, you kind of have that as like something to fall back on, but long distance, you really have that emotional and psychological and even intellectual or spiritual connection that has to keep you guys going. So
we used to know our benefit because we both had the patterns in the past to rush into relationships, probably. Right?
Yeah.
Love that. Totally relate to that. Did you have the same feeling, Laura, when you guys first hugged? Like,
yeah, that was like the confirmation for me. Yeah.
It's funny you said Skype. I don't know. Does anybody remember Skype? There was a time.
It's true. Skype, what happened? Yeah, we did Skype. I spent a lot of time, like I was really focused in India on my own meditation practice. And so I was in another space, to be honest, when he met. Like right before we met, I actually, in a meditation retreat, had this profound experience of divine grace, where I realized that everything I was looking for in a relationship, I was looking for in God, basically. So God was the answer to all of that. And then all of my desperation literally fell away in that moment. I was like, oh my God. Because I had this belief, actually, because of childhood wounding, I'm sure, is that a relationship would make me happy, and that was going to be the end all be all. So then when I was on like the 9th day of this meditation retreat, I just felt amazing. And I was like, oh my God, this is actually what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for a relationship. And then ironically, we met short couple months after.
Now you're ready. Now you're ready. That's
beautiful.
Amazing. I love what you said, both of you, just really understanding, like you said, like we've known Bernhard a little longer and watching him do his intense work and really out there, but he hit this place where it's like, you know what, I can only go so far. And it's, one of our favorite, I guess, sentence scriptures about love is from the Bible, from 1 Corinthians. It talks about what love is. Love is patient, love is kind. It doesn't envy. It not abusive, it's not proud, it's not keeping record of wrongs. And it's an incredible, I've been a DJ for weddings for 30 years. I see this read, and it's a beautiful, and it's not the all-encompassing of what love is, but it's a really good list.
It's a good checklist.
But before that or afterwards, it talks about if you have faith that can move mountains, and you can speak to the angels, and you can do all the things, and you can read the Akash, and you're a psychic, and you can speak many languages of light or whatever it is, but you have not love, it's a clanging cymbal. It's just a sound. It's just, it has not the potency. And we find that, how do you know if you have love? Well, be in relationship. Find out somebody up close to you personally, where is love truly being in your life?
Yeah, totally. I think that would lead to the next question is, you know, once you guys came together, and I think it's really important to highlight the fact that having time before you enter into a committed relationship of really talking and getting to know someone, I think that is the benefit of distance. It's kind of like almost like the head and the heart. You've got, you know, the physical connection is as important, but that soul connection, if you don't have that, or it gets ignited physically too soon, you bypass so much of what needs to come up between you. So when you guys actually came together physically and you began to live together and do life together, what were the first things that started kind of maybe unraveling in terms of the patterns that started to come up and show themselves?
Well, we actually found out the other day, we've had a Pluto-Venus conjunction transit on our composite chart
when we met.
Literally, it's still going on now. So we've had, because Pluto's a very slow moving planet, our composite Venus is in Capricorn. That's been conjunct since we've met, basically.
Wow.
And so the dial was turned, like the crazy thing is when you have more self-awareness, you see more in yourself and your partner. And then it's like, there's not a lot of hiding in our relationship. No. That's the problem, actually. I think that some couples can push things under the rug and just go to work and then just come home and ignore their spouse or watch TV. It's like, we don't have that. Like when something is up or something is happening, it's very hard for us to hide it from each other. You know, that's actually been something we had to work on, this kind of differentiation, because we're so in tune with each other. But I think even in the very beginning, like it was very clear, the unresolved relationship trauma that we both actually had. And
it came up pretty early. Actually.
Like if you really want a higher level of union, but you didn't have that templated to you as a child, you're like making it up as you go along, basically. And then I think the first thing that you're shown is everything that's actually in the way of that. So you're like, here's how I actually relate, you know, like, what were you laughing at?
No, this is true, because I was laughing. You know, for any astrologers, we definitely have a Plutonian type relationship because we are Plutonian people. And Pluto is kind of like the transformer, right? It doesn't let anything unturned. I mean, in my personal chart, I have almost 10 aspects to Pluto. She has a very Scorpio Plutonian, energy. So there's a lot of just like, you know, making the darkness conscious on steroids, right? But the reason why I was laughing, because I was, definitely when I remember like, I'm ready for a relationship because I hit a wall. So I want to experience more human love and kind of getting, you know, but then I get what I asked for, because a lot of stuff that came up was intense. I couldn't have, here's the thing, you cannot face by yourself. That's why you guys know there's only so much self-work you can do by yourself, because you have your own blind spots, patterns, 100%. And only in relationship, by relating, more stuff gets activated. And that was very clear. Her stuff got activated. Mine stuff, I already thought I worked through from my mom's childhood wounding and all this kind of stuff got intensified. And sometimes, gets heated. Sometimes we project it on each other, right? We get triggered. Conflict, and then we need to reel back in. Hold on, let's do the repair. Let's own it. How can we transform it, alchemize it, so to speak? And that's the work.
We've gotten better at like writing. Actually, we've used it to inform a lot of our work too now as well, because we've had this intense practice, working with projections, working with triggers, working through conflict, like all of that is something that we have had to apply out of necessity in our relationship because we haven't been able to hide, I think there's couples who can sometimes put their relationship asleep for even decades, you know, but I can't do that. I can't even like leave it for like a few days, like even a day. If we have something that's unresolved, like we don't go to bed with stuff unresolved. We make sure that we do some level of repair and we don't have this like backlog of stuff that needs to be addressed.
The psychic connection intense because I literally cannot even any emotion I cannot hide from her. She knows it, she feels it, she's just like, you know what I mean?
We
It's just like,
understand.
Jesus, you know what I mean? So like, okay, what's up? Let's talk about it. Like, I can't even just avoid it, you know? So there's no way.
Well, we are, you know, we actually had the joy of being on a, you know, was it a couple months ago of evolutionary relationship, you know, and they had a great turnout and
the masterclass.
The workshop that you guys
did.
It was fantastic.
You know, and that you could feel that, and we say thank you for the work that you're doing in yours, because we understand and relate. You know, our mess is our message, right? The work that we're doing informs what we, you know, we're in the cauldron, the alchemy of purification. This isn't just, you know, a white picket fence and 2.5 kids. I don't know what half a kid comes, but and a dog and living for ourselves, you know. I mean, one of our favorite authors is Chris Sade and Andrew Harvey at Evolutionary Love Relationship. And, you know, truly what they talk about is what's needed in the world in this time of crisis. They talk about is a vision, is a model of what evolutionary love relationship really looks like embodied. And it's not easy. And to go through this work, especially when you're awakening to another reality that is beyond the consensus mind, you know, something that I really took away from our time with you guys so much. But, you know, they talk about that, you know, 80% of our planet is in consensus thinking. You know, they're in the, you know, just the kind of, this is what the Joneses do. This is what this is what you do. This is the programming from the mainstream media. This is all that's going on. And 20% of the population is individuating, you know, or going through questioning the reality, questioning the program, questioning my beliefs of my parents or my government or whatever is going on that I'm being told, you know, 20% of the planet. And then maybe 2 to 3% are spiritualized, you know, and we find in relationship, it's very rare to find couples such as yourselves that are truly digging in and doing this work.
Yeah, totally. It's almost like, and you guys can maybe speak to this, it feels like before these last 3 years, maybe overlapping, that the expansion of consciousness and intelligence and ideas and theories and seeing things, you know, beyond what maybe they're telling us reality is. But it feels like over these past, even this last year, bringing it back into practical, grounded, simple human connection is kind of like, it's like the tests. Is this the truth or these ideas? And in our home, where we often talk about, like, the smallest form of government is our relationship. And if we cannot learn how to navigate, you know, our conflicts here, how could we possibly ever expect that through voting people in who have imperfect humanness and imperfect relationships, that would ever change anything in the long term? So
that's why the work that people do in their relationship is so important, because it will create a ripple effect to every other relationship that they have. You know, you can get the practice in your relationship, and then it becomes super easy out in the world, you know, because it's the hardest to do in the relationship.
Like I want to just add on that, like Jason said, you know, he knew me before I went with Laura, you know, and I've heard from people ever since I'm with Laura, I've kind of have softened a bit, right?
Absolutely.
Totally.
Because I've been on this journey for a while and very outspoken, and no one being German Aquarius, Mars and Aries, me being a bit of like, you know, I have my own like definitely engaged in shadow projections and my own frustration and pain projected onto the world. I can see that, despite or intellectualized spiritual or psychological knowledge, right? And without truly embodying and applying myself. So
Right.
what you said with this past 3 years, a lot of people, there's a silver lining, I always say, there's an attempted enslavement of humanity, but the silver lining or paradox is it forces us to focus on what truly matters. And for people ready to truly engage in the work, you have another choice, or you will just go nuts and combust, so to speak.
Yeah, like it's too crazy to tune into the collective. Like you can keep aware, but I know like if I go on to Twitter for too long and check up, I'm in a frenzy and I'm like, whoa, this is not good for my soul. It's not good for my spirit, So I think it's important to become aware, but not to plug into that consciousness because it's very dark right now.
Yeah. And then also with meeting Laura, like in our relationship, she also then, in a sense, forces me to apply what I preach. Now I can't, because it's easy in this kind of work. I never, this, I never claim to be enlightened or all this. I'm always a work in progress. I have my own shit going on. But speaking about the topics we're speaking, you can easily become, you're speaking of this big, like when I quote Sri Aurobindo, I'm quoting Sri Aurobindo. It doesn't mean that I'm on this level, so I don't want to come across like a hypocrite. I need to apply the work, and it's not easy work. But then the relationship serves at, like you said, as this little like environment where you can, really, because all about relationship, all about humanity is about relating, and we can use relationship as the ground to really, do the work to become better embodied human beings for the better of the all. That's really what it comes down to.
And there's this time, I would love for you to talk about, when you say the time of transition, and then one of the key words that we hear a lot, and you say a lot, is sincere self-work. Describe, maybe talk about the time of transition and how important, especially because we're seeing in relationship, how that sincere self-work is being reflected. We're really but what does sincere self-work looks like?
So in a nutshell, the time of transition is a phrase I took off when I was studying esoteric Christianity based on the work of Moraviev, similar to Gurdjieff's fourth-way teachings. And the time of transition in a nutshell is the transitional phase we're in right now, almost between ages. You can see it in the Eastern tradition as well. So we're in a traditional phase. We're in a transformation, the birth into a new world. And it's like the Hopi Indian says, you know what I mean? Like there can be a way up or down. So it's a very critical stage. There's an opportunity for spiritualization, so to speak, or individuation, but it depends on each one of us. So that's kind of the transitional phase when right, like a birth canal. Now, sincere self-work, what I mean by, I was struck by, I remember when I first started Gurdjieff's work, which also had a big impact in my life, fourth way. And he said this very profound quote, sincerity with everyone is a weakness. I'm like, wow, we're not supposed to, what means sincere? Like be honest, truthful, authentic, with everyone is a weakness from an esoteric perspective, because you have to kind of like navigate this world very carefully, and protect yourself from like be the H. Smith syndrome or other people who are not sincere. But he says most important is be sincere with yourself. And Adyashanti talked about this, most important is the sincerity with self, the mother and Sri Aurobindo, sincerity with self. And what does it mean, sincerity with yourself? You need to be very extremely brutal self-honesty. Stop lying to yourself.
And committed to seeing reality as it is. That's the hard part, is like really seeing it as it is on multidimensional levels in the present moment will wake you up. But I think we have all of these defense mechanisms and distractions from even looking at that.
Exactly.
And I think the thing also as well, speaking about the consensus, is that a lot of people, when they're waking up out of the consensus, they kind of like dip their toe into the individuation process, or sometimes even dip their toe into like psychological, spiritual practices. And it's almost like a phase for them, or something like interesting to go down. Yeah. And they don't realize that this is like every waking moment of your life, when appropriate, it's best to apply these things. And that's what sincerity is. It's like, you won't get it all the time, but if you have that intention within yourself, even that faith that there's some higher version of you who's yet to be discovered, and to work on kind of actualizing that, it can motivate you. But I think for a lot of people, they choose staying asleep. They choose the habitual patterns because it's hard. Like even I have moments where I just check out and I'm like, okay, what's
Yeah.
going on with me, and having to bring myself back and see what's happening. And that's hard. Like you discover things about yourself that you didn't know about. You discover things about reality you might not want to know about.
Yeah.
You see you start to pierce beyond the veils of your own perceptions, basically. And that can be a really hard process. And also, I think you have to get comfortable with changing yourself, which is also very scary to the human ego. The human ego wants its kind of structure and to stay the same. So it is a real commitment to the path of growth constantly and applying every single thing that can work on that path, which is kind of what we do in Embodied Soul Awakening. Is you compile a lot of tools we think are helpful, and ideally you can just learn them and you can start to apply them in the moment to some extent, to the extent that you understand them, but I think a lot of people, I do shadow work for 2 months and then I'm going to leave it alone.
No, thank you for asking that, Jason. This is very important as a sincerity. And I even use it. When we talked about, I do the discovery calls for people who enroll in an Embodied Soul Awakening program by application, right? Because what I'm looking for, it's not just anybody who can afford it gets in. No, I want people who are sincere, because we've seen it so many times. And there's even, like Laura just mentioned, now there's this potential. Everybody talks about awakening and doing self-work, but you're not awake just because you know about Klaus Schwab and the Great Reset, right? So how the sincerity comes in, because even in the program, as you know, when you go through it, you will see things about yourself or confront things you might not like at all. And it's a difficult process. So if you just, like Laura said, I'm just curious, I want to know, but I just want to do this work to feel better and fulfill my dreams, then this is not for you. Because
then you're going to be avoiding pain at every single uncomfortable moment, actually. So the sincerity has to also be there to guide you through the painful process with the faith that this will lead to something good.
Absolutely. It's interesting because it seems like there's the involution and the evolution part of this, right? It's like you're moving forward, but you have to keep going back in deeper and deeper in order to keep moving forward. And I think the intensity that's heating up right now, I think would have probably a lot to do with the fact that if people dabble and open these channels up, it's not something you can stop. You can try and put it to sleep with masking it or numbing it. But once this ball gets rolling, it's happening. It's the awakening is occurring, and you can go drug, behind a truck, or you get to work along with this process. And I think one of the things I notice in like Instagram and all TikTok and pop spirituality is it gives people such a false illusion that they're doing spiritual work, and they open channels that they're not ready to, that they're not prepared to face that, those parts of themselves. So I think things are intensifying, addictions are higher, suicides are higher, because you start this ball rolling and it's like, it takes a life of its own on,
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm Laura, you're more active on those platforms,
on TikTok,
because there's something happening. There's more awareness around trauma and like all these. But there's also the dark side. Everybody's all of a sudden a coach now after like they, after like they
and many
read
of
some
them
quotes.
but many people don't sincerely want to help people with their whole heart and soul. And that's the whole problem with that like burgeoning industry is like you're helping people in some really extreme suffering sometimes.
Yes.
Like you better have a connection to your own heart. Otherwise you could hurt them, and I think that, worse. The TikTok thing is crazy. We actually saw something, how to escape from the matrix on TikTok the other day. And it was like, become as wealthy as possible. Like literally was one of the steps, but this is the level we're getting to, but I think that this is kind of also, because I'm active on social media, but people don't understand. I actually spend most of my time listening to books and or reading books, listening to podcasts, listening to lectures and stuff. I don't get good information from there. It's almost like this kind of trickle down effect where the information gets degraded onto social media, where it's not even holding an essential truth anymore. It's like so covered up in all sorts of nonsense. And I think that's also this era of spiritual materialism we live in, which is an aspect of insincerity. And the work is like, you want to bargain with the work. Like, I'll do this if I get this out of it, or I'll be willing to put out this much in as long as I get this much out of it. And I think that, this is the first attitude to be defeated is like, do I really want to discover my own true nature? or am I doing this because I think I'm going to get a job, a relationship, whatever, power, fame, money, I don't know, whatever, you know? And I think that that comes from the call of the soul, actually.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, there's a
Beautiful
separating
said.
of the wheat from the chaff, the splitting of humanity.
Yeah.
Many are called, few choose to answer the call. You see it anywhere, everywhere, in all the prophecies and scriptures as well. And that's kind of what it entails, right? And you see, nowadays, the temptation, there's also this sense of entitlement or lack of social grace, and people are very entitled, I see, on especially on the internet, because there's this illusion of everything is for free, so everything should be free. And then, you know, they're not even, I'm not talking about even monetary things that, you know, that fair exchange and all of that.
they don't want to give it any of themselves.
Give themselves, like good, just like you have to pay for yourselves. You know, a lot of the stuff we share, we teach, you know, or what's coming to light now in the past, you had to go through all kinds of tests, initiation to be proven worthy that the teacher will teach will teach you, right?
Yeah.
And nowadays, like, everybody wants to be spoon-fed and not do any work, and please, can you do it for me, right?
Yeah.
So that's where the sincerity comes in.
And the
right
will,
now.
you know, the will is like, you need to generate enough of your own energy to channel and know how to channel it into the right direction, because there's so many distractions these days. Like, I even notice myself, I'm like, wow, like, I gotta watch my own social media consumption, because the way that it makes my brain just like all over the place, like, that's not a good space to be in for this kind of work too, you know? So
Totally.
we're
thank you
like
for all
swimming upstream right now. It's actually much harder to do this kind of work now. But actually, from a tantric perspective, the harder it is, the more results you'll get if you apply yourself.
Now, when you say tantric perspective, Laura, this is a buzzword in spiritual circles.
Yeah, not the neo. No,
I know what you mean, but
we know what
I'm
you
referring
mean.
to Reggie Ray. He's my like main meditation teacher, amazing somatic meditation teacher from the stream of Vajrayana Buddhism, and he's really taught me about that approach of like embrace reality directly, all the breakdowns, all the madness, all the grief, you know, because that's the path, and that's actually the difference to this kind of transcendence path, that we need to just think positive thoughts and, you know, connect to Jesus and everything will be okay. You know, it's about going directly into the seed of the reality of the human experience as the path of transformation.
Yes, so important. Thank you. And that's, you know, we've spent our journey and our together transcending, speaking to the ascended masters and the angels and the spiritual delusions and illusions that can happen on the spiritual journey. And so, you know, our journey has come into, you know, and that's why we took the 3-month, you know, Embodied Soul Awakening, because we knew that this is about really, as we understand, you know, shadow work is a big part of this evolutionary love relationship. That we have to go into the dark. We have to descend into these places, and not, you know, as we love, all of us love Carl Jung. You don't reach enlightenment by imagining figures of light, by imagining angels. And, you know, as you said, we make the darkness conscious in ourselves. We become aware, and we truly come into a holistic state.
And the self, you know, the true self illuminates the darkness. So if people have profound spiritual experiences, excuse me, and then they spiral down, in my experience, that's the self illuminating what was already there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You know? I love that. That's, you know, I guess everything exists in polarity, right? It's like, as far as we're willing to go down into the depths of ourselves. And I think we find too, the deeper work we do, the stuff that's really, really down is like so incredibly vulnerable, so incredibly like the rawest pain. And there's a willingness that's growing to let that grief and that sadness and the joy sit next to each other, rather than trying to separate them like they're mutually exclusive. Like there's room for all of it, and that's part of our reclaiming our wholeness and our innocence, is letting all of those things coexist. And I'm curious what you guys think about the polarity teachings, because, you know, as with the pop spirituality and the way that these things get distilled, I can see there's some truth to it, because we know that polarity is real. But what are your reflections on some of what you see in regards to those teachings?
I think well, I'll go off the bat and then I'll let Bernhard say his piece. I think they hold an essential truth in them, you know, and I think that what they're addressing is the masculinization of woman and the feminization of man.
Totally.
I
Yeah.
agree that's taken place in
Yeah.
all sorts of distorted ways, but it seems to be missing the deeper, more soulful, even spiritual dimensions of masculine and feminine nature, including the anima animus piece
Yes.
that we talk about in the course. You know, like whenever we get into our like kind of conflicts and battle it out, it's really unhealthy anima animus, like my own unhealthy inner masculine, his own unhealthy inner feminine
Yeah.
coming
Totally.
through, you know, our born genders, you know. So it's just, I think that I can see why it's happening. I like to really zoom out and be like, what does this symbolize to the collective and why is this so popular now? But we've just also seen it revert back to, you know, like I'm just noticing more and more in my work and the work we do together that the soul and the spiritual nature is like in a point of focus for me. And so if a teaching is only addressing like personality, like be a feminine woman like this, be a masculine man like this, it doesn't cut it for me, basically, you know.
Yeah.
And that's what we see a lot, like women need to stay at home, men need to work. It's like this very first, you know, I think David Data even addressed this, like it's almost like this first stage of polarization where the man is in a very strict gendered role and the woman is in a very strict gendered role. And I think there's truth in that, actually.
Yeah.
That women tend to be better at certain things and men to be better at certain things, but it's just become this basically personality development thing in order to get a relationship. And at the end of the day, we found that in order to get a relationship, it doesn't have a lot to do with this, I don't think. And to make a relationship work, it doesn't have a lot to do with this either. But that's just our experience in our relationship. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm also be careful what I'm saying.
we don't want to, like, we actually do know, even including a woman in our chorus who's into this kind of stuff. We're in the last class who we really like. So, you know, we're just careful not to say talk crap or whatever,
Yeah,
you know, while also addressing how we really feel about it.
Yes,
too.
let's put it this way. I'm not the one to throw the baby with the bathwater. I think it has its place. I think it's also a mechanical counter reaction to this kind of woke stuff.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And it has its place, but there are, like, also just echo what Laura said, there's certain issues that I see this more from what I've studied and seen. And there are different variants. There's some people having good work, some people to take it to very pathological extreme, I have to say. You know what I mean? Like not honoring women's boundaries, they don't matter at all. Or if you think as a man you have an inner female, then you're emasculated, like extreme, like nonsense, basically.
No spiritual understanding of reality is
so basically, what it's based on, what I see is just just behavioral role playing personalities. It works on the outer personality, you know. And it works on polarization. And what I noticed too, because I'm going deep into my own practice of integral yoga, you know, Sri Aurobindo's work, and any esoteric teaching is also like getting out of the mechanicalness of nature, not being slave to nature, what's called integral Purusha, you know. And I see the polarity teachings are still very much ingrained in nature of just this biological friction to create this polarization and the sexual attraction and all of that. And it has its place. Some people are that, but I see this actually as a very low state, a first stage of relationship mating, so to speak. And of this hypersexualization as well. And like, the man needs to be leading and the woman is submissive. And I've seen, unfortunately, a lot of harm being done as well. You know,
like if you go into the teaching with trauma, for example,
exactly trauma, for example, you know, a lot of traumatized women have been even more sexually abused because they submit themselves to a man who's dominant. That's kind of opens up a can of worms, so to speak. You know, I've seen a lot of like very wounded, insecure men being drawn to this. They come from this, like also this, it's like almost a spin of this pickup artist movement as well, you know, sort of slightly, not that crass, but again, it has its place, you know. I mean, some like Laura said, you know, there's, you know, men need to connect more to the true masculineness and women to the feminine. But like she said, or what you guys may experience, once you really enter the spiritual realm and do spiritual work within yourself and also a spiritual relationship, then a lot of that goes out of the window. You know, you cannot like polarize this these gender roles anymore than it is about the alchemical marriage of the inner male and female, the anima and animus.
Yeah.
Right? Which has nothing to do with gender.
Which is pretty hard to integrate.
Exactly.
Fully.
And also not being a slave to what's called esoteric Christianity, the general law, just this, you know, oh, I'm horny, I need to, you know, I have this sexual desire, I need to follow it, boom, boom, boom. You know what I mean? There's a way then comes the deeper tantric phase to kind of transmute this as well to higher levels. And not just constantly polarize on these lower levels. Again, so that's kind of in a nutshell, it has its place.
Yeah, I think it's also coming out though, because women have been masculinized by feminism to a large extent, you know, to work in the world. And a lot of them are realizing that feminism lied to them in many ways about that. And that there is an essential feminine nature, which is needed right now. Like, I think a lot of the shit we see happening on the world stage is not the patriarchy. It's actually the toxic feminine who's like, everyone needs to be the same. Everyone needs to be equal. You all need to do this for the greater good. Like, that's a toxic mom, not a toxic dad. And I think that where it's coming from is like people are realizing maybe even the healing power of the feminine nature, and then realizing how far gone women have gotten from that. You know, we're not even women anymore. We're called like birthing person with a uterus, you know,
with a chest,
so exactly. So I think it's answering like a real desperate kind of call of the collective soul. But it's working as long as it works on the persona level, I don't think that it's the answer that or it's at least not the direction that I'm looking into.
Like you said, it can be do more harm than any good, because then you go into shadow suppression.
Yeah, like I'm more interested in bringing forth my true self to the front, whatever that is, my true soul nature, and as an expression of my personality, rather than trying to design a new personality that is like the spiritual trend of the era or whatever, you know. Like, I think that that's the issue of it. As long as you're defining for people, this is what the feminine's supposed to be, this is what the masculine is, you're going to get people who are going to be in persona development.
It's more persona. Yeah, I think it's also in our work, we're not even with our Embodied Soul Awakening, we even say that it's not a personality developmental program, you know?
Right.
And most of polarity seems that kind of stuff, you know what I mean? That's fine and good if that's what you need and where you want to focus on, but don't mistake that for any like awakening or anything, any deeper work, you know?
At the same time, I just want to say, I think there's very profound healing in men stepping up into their roles as the masculine and women stepping up to their roles in the feminine. And there is almost this like natural law rebalancing, which is necessary to happen because they're actually trying to eliminate gender altogether. And so I think it's a necessary step, but it's probably not, it's not like operating at the individuated or even spiritualized level, I feel.
I think the issues of extremes, because obviously if people like on both sides, we see that if you're part of consensus left or right, you can go into extremes.
Right.
Totally.
Extreme, what I definitely see, there is actually a far right extremism rising, and not the one we're being told by the mainstream media, but there is this like intense, like traditional, like I've seen some close friends swallow that pill, and if you guys have seen it as well, for example,
white supremacy,
actual white
supremacy as well,
and also like this very very toxic form of self-righteous fundamentalist dogmatic Christianity.
Yeah, the old
it's also rising. You know what I mean? So,
and this is all an answer to the progressive left, actually. It's kind of like the pendulum swinging, but I also see it as potential. There's this concept, which I find really interesting in psychology, called projective identification, where if you basically, so if I project on him that he's angry, oh, you're such an angry person all the time, eventually he might even become angry because I keep projecting on him. So I bring that part more out of him. And I think because people have been projected on, called racist, white supremacists, Christian nationalists, we're literally seeing people join into those ranks, actually.
Yeah, unfortunately,
because it's like these times are not for like the psychologically unaware, because of the amount of projections that are going on. You could easily identify and just swing to the other side.
I have some close friends, I used to have close friends for years, I've seen going on this dark road. And I had to like through my own grieving process, almost letting go of these friendships because I cannot follow that. It's very the other extreme. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's almost a trauma response. It's going to be used as like a psychological spiritual bypass of this. Oh, I'm a manly man now. You know? and God
Yeah.
in the Bible, and you belong in the kitchen, and I'm a warrior now.
And it's still the
You know?
exoteric, you know,
Yeah.
like we talked about in the relationship webinar we did. You know, there's the exoteric, the externally focused
Yeah.
relationship with
Right.
God, and there's the esoteric, which is the eternal. And the esoteric is 100% the direction that we've been going into.
Yeah.
So
Well, what you've said
Yeah,
here is
so
just, you know, and this is why we felt really guided to invite you two specifically on this very day. It's very special to us, because truly what the 1111 has truly meant for me and for us is that it is that anima animus being, you know, here's Laura, here's Bernhard, you know, balancing the anima animus within themselves. And when two people come together, as Andrew Harvey and Chris said, they become a transformative field of energy. You become a portal. You become a stargate. You become a vessel, a container for supernal power when you're doing your individuated, sincere self-work, as they've been talking about, and how important that is to let go of the illusions and delusions of who we think we are, the spiritual glamour, the spiritual materialism, and get embodied into your mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual bodies and do the work, because you know, it's important. We are in this time, and it's sobering when you read the Mother and Sri Aurobindo's work about where we are. You know, we've collectively have been this point, you know, who knows, but you know, there could be a reset, not the global think that you think, but there could be a moment if we don't dig in and as one goes, as you know, we always believe you go two by two in the arc, you know, we go, we're going to transition 2 by 2, and how important it is to be in a relationship, whether you're in a, you know, a monogamous or you're just in relationship to community, how important it is to do this work. And that's truly what the 1111 means, and beyond, you know, angel codes or whatever that is. But you know, we're kind of coming down to almost an hour here. And we could talk to you two forever and ever.
I've got one thing I would love to just ask, maybe as we're kind of beginning to land, just something really.
You want to ask them, are they twin flames? Is that
right. Are you twin flames or twin rays?
Totally
What, just as a practical thing to leave couples with, couples and people that are in high stakes relationships. We love how Jason Gaddis talks about what are the most high stake relationships in our lives, whether it's a partnership or kids or whatever. But we're at a time where we realize that if we want to maintain relationships, we've got to learn how to navigate through conflict and do it in a way that doesn't cause more damage in the process and more trauma. What would you guys say that, as you've learned over these last several years, you mentioned earlier that you're learning how to navigate through conflict better with quicker resolve. Do you have some practical wisdom that you can kind of give us for conflict resolution? What works for you guys?
Well, I would say number one, don't avoid conflict. Don't put things under the rug.
Don't lie. It's a type of lying to your partner to do that.
Withhold
actually,
things. That's already a big red flag. If you stop saying certain things, or just, you know, then it grows apart. You can be together physically, but it's like there will be resentment, unconscious stuff, all kinds of bad stuff happening in the future. So don't avoid it. And then there's all kinds of conflicts. Sometimes more can be heated. When it's very heated, more hostile and very angry, you know, then it's definitely time out. Let the emotions come back again after 5-10 minutes. You know what I mean? Don't let the anger overrun you. There's nothing wrong with anger, because much of anger can, you know, we've actually built up because of childhood wounding, and it's coming up in relationship. We project on our partner. So we don't want to demonize the anger. We need to allow us to feel it, but okay, we need time out. We cannot, when we're emotionally riled up, time out, then get back together. And the most important part, I would say, is definitely the repair afterwards. You know, to really have the repair.
Like you got to master
the repair. There needs to be humility, where everybody owns their parts, and, you know, have a certain, I feel, in a constellation of certain psychological understanding, you know, of how to do shadow work, triggers and all of that, where we can then own our parts. And that's where the repair happens, because the repair not only happens in relationship, but then childhood wounding repair happens right there. That's how we use relationship as a catalyst, because a lot of the stuff, everybody has childhood wounds to varying degrees. We just play it out in relationship. We can recognize, and the repair is key.
Yeah, you got to like master the repair as much as is necessary. And also repair is basically when you guys feel you're both in a good place again, when you can laugh, you can talk, it doesn't need to mean the problem's totally solved, but the emotional connection has been bonded again. And we also have things, we have little practices we do, conflict practices. We have a practice, it's called an eye to eye, where one person talks, the other person listens, the other person is not allowed, who's listening isn't allowed to complain or, counterattack. They just have to listen, validate, ask questions. So we have little structures that we use, especially around very heated topics, to make sure that it doesn't get derailed very quickly, because I think a lot of us have not been taught how to work through conflict in relationship at all. And you see that very clearly on social media these days. So like learning how to, my challenge is in relationship is like, just managing anxiety when he's saying something that's different than what I believe, and so a lot of it is just being able to sit with your differences and really hear them and accept them. A lot of people want to change their partner into something that they're not, which is what a lot of conflicts are sometimes based around, is like, you need to believe this, whereas we take a different approach and we're like, can we just be with the other person in their different experience, perceptions, manage our own feelings about it. And even if the experience or sharing is about us, like it's just, you have to develop that emotional resilience in relationship. Otherwise you're not going to get that level of like soul connection that you want,
Yeah, differentiation phase is key, because a lot of what people, the biggest illusion I see, especially in this whole new age twin flame stuff or soulmate or romanticism, Hollywood, that we think when you like found your perfect partner, he or she, we're all the same. We like the same stuff. We do the same things. We're always on the same page. That's not the reality. You know what I mean? A mature relationship, like we have differences, we have certain different, even our spirituality have different approaches. We look in the same direction in terms of intention, but what works for her might not work for me. In the past, we have projected on each other, I think we all like this little inner child wants, our partner to be exactly like we do.
But you don't deep down inside.
Which is
you
actually
don't.
this is highly narcissistic if you think about it.
But deep down inside, it's definitely what you don't want, though. Like if you actually were able to force your partner to be more like you, this is when the polarity people come in and they help you out.
Polarity police. Oh my gosh, my pretty little pet.
Yeah.
Well,
Totally.
great
Good
answer.
stuff,
Thank you. Super practical, super helpful. Hopefully, viewer, if you're listening to this and watching this, that you just take that away. We saw Jason Gaddis recently talking about 12 agreements, that one of those things is conflict is not a warning sign that your relationship's in trouble.
Yeah.
It's just you're doing the work, and how to repair is an art form. And that's the process. And if you don't know how to repair, find a coach, find somebody, talk to these two, talk to us, and how do you repair? Because it's so important that we don't run at the first sight of fire or trouble.
Yeah, that's a key
and
point.
don't let the sun go down on your anger.
We cannot do this on our own.
When it gets really sticky, especially if there's a lot of repair needs to be done, it really helps to have people that, like you guys or someone to work with.
And speaking of that, we really want to just highlight some things here. So first of all, your Cosmic Matrix podcast is absolutely amazing. It's been a beacon for us. I mean, you guys are doing great work. Thank you for digging in and doing that together. The ways that you guys do that, and the information and the activation. I truly believe there is an activation principle happening when you listen to that. And it challenges you. It challenges you in a good way.
Absolutely. And it keeps getting better. I mean, I just love that you guys, it feels so relevant to, it's almost a peer into what you guys are processing, either in your relationship or your,
that's how we like, okay, what are we getting into this week?
Right. But it's like, because it's fresh from spirit, because it's what you're working with. And I think that's one of the ways we really learn to embody, is really talk about and teach what it is we're trying to learn. It's a powerful way to really land it in our own life. So what else is coming up for you guys? I know Embodied Soul Awakening, you guys are starting that soon again.
Yeah, that's the main thing we're focusing on. So we have one from December 26th till April 3rd, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be 14 weeks this time, right?
Yeah, so we just added a couple more weeks, but it's basically, for people who don't know our work, it's a 14-week program in psychospiritual, psychological, and spiritual self-work guided by Bernhard and I. We have weekly sharing calls. We have weekly coaching calls. and very dense curriculum, which I'm sure you guys can attest to.
We're
We
still
go
going
into
through it.
IFS, internal family systems. We go into evolutionary astrology, the occult, the matrix. You can see everything on the www.thetimeoftransition.com.
Yeah, anybody interested, it's limited to 35 people and by application only. And you can find out more at thattimeoftransition.com.
Awesome. We'll
And
put all
also,
that in the comments.
veilofreality.com is a
Yes,
great
that's
place
my
to find
website.
you guys.
Exactly.
And
That's
then
where
I
all
would
the
encourage.
podcasts.
Go ahead.
No, that's where all the writings and podcasts and videos are on there as well. Yeah.
Perfect.
And then Laura's got LauraMatsue.com. We'll put all of this information.
I don't use my
on the-
website, but yeah, that's my
No?
website.
Okay.
And if you're on
I understand.
Telegram, at Time of Transition, definitely follow these two
Yeah.
and what they're putting
Yes.
out there. It's been super
Mhm.
helpful.
Yeah.
You know, I've had to get rid of a lot of Telegram channels, and I really keep very
Yeah.
slim in one.
Yeah.
of
You got to
guys.
kind of like focus on what.
Yeah, I don't even
Yeah.
check them anymore, actually.
Yeah.
I'm just like in my own
You know,
world.
and so, I mean, here we are. Just thank you too. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
we love you
so
guys.
much in here. It's so good. And, you know, we pray that this ripples out into the hearts and minds of many.
Yeah.
But any last words or any things that you want to leave with the people?
With the people. I love it.
I don't know. What do you want to say?
I was just
first,
thinking,
Ray?
like, thing of sincerity. I had this quote in my mind. We talked about the mother and Sri Aurobindo. And the mother said, I was very fast, you know, one test to know how sincere you are is when you're really sincere, you know how insincere you actually are.
Mm,
There you go. Bam.
that's true.
That is so true.
That humility, because they're always like,
Very true. Well,
so that's what I'm
we-
saying. Like, do you, or as Adyashanti said once, you know, that's what I'm going to give people. Do you really want to be awakened or just be happy in your dream life?
Yeah.
The two
Yeah.
different, you know, contemplating on that
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. You know, during these midterm elections, we heard something really profound. We were at different places, and she texted me and goes, "Did you just hear that?" And I forget how it said, but it was, man seeks safety rather than freedom.
Yeah.
Instead of choosing freedom, they seek safety. And as
Yeah.
in this time that, you know, we're being called into a death and rebirth. And
Mhm.
birth isn't neat and tidy and safe and secure. You know, I
Yes.
nearly lost my son in the birth of him. It was 10 weeks early, and birth is a very messy thing. And
Yeah.
Dark and bloody.
we have to go through this death and rebirth, and we have to die to ourselves. And greater love hath no man, no woman, that they lay down their life. They lay down their egoic ideals and personalities and take off the mask and just let it go and surrender and be absolved into this incredible, powerful presence. And that's
Mhm.
truly what this day means for us.
Mhm.
And you too, we love, adore you. We wish we were
Yeah,
closer.
thank
We'd
you
go on
so
hikes with
much.
you and your dog out on the Sedona Hills there,
We
in the
would.
mountains. And, but just
Beautiful.
thank you for the work you're doing. So once again, do tune in and consider, you know, if you can, how many seats are available? Is it, I'm sure you guys fill out.
At now we are down
There's
to 20 something.
20, yeah, something, yeah.
They're already, it's starting to fill up.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, definitely
Get it out there.
consider that. It'll change your life. It will bring awareness to you. So,
Yeah, we just love you guys. Thanks for being with us.
Love you guys
Yeah.
too.
Thank
Thanks so
you.
much.
you're so
All right.
welcome.
Thanks, guys, for listening.